I never thought sitting alone in a dim hospital room would teach me exactly where I stood in my family. My name is Colleen, and at 28 years old, I had always tried to be the perfect daughter. I worked hard, stayed out of trouble, and genuinely cared about making my parents proud. But as I stared out that window, watching other families come and go, I could not help but wonder why mine had not shown up yet. My brother Marcus had always been the golden child, but I never imagined a horrific car accident would reveal just how deep that favoritism ran. Before I dive into this story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you have not already. Trust me, what happened next will make you question everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. Let's get started. Growing up in our middle-class household in suburban Atlanta, the dynamics were crystal clear from day one. My father Richard worked as a mechanical engineer for a large corporation, while my mother Patricia spent her days as a registered nurse at Emory University Hospital. Then there was Marcus, my older brother by 3 years, who seemed to walk on water in our parents' eyes. Finally, there was me, always trying to measure up to an impossible standard. Marcus had attended Harvard Business School and landed a prestigious position at Goldman Sachs right after graduation. Every family gathering revolved around his latest achievement, his newest promotion, or his impressive salary. Meanwhile, I had chosen to become an elementary school teacher, a career that brought me genuine joy, but apparently little respect from my family. When people asked what I did for a living at family functions, I could see the disappointment flash across my parents' faces before they quickly changed the subject to Marcus's latest business deal. The differences in how we were treated became apparent from childhood. When Marcus wanted the latest PlayStation, my parents would drive to 3 different stores to find it. When I asked for a new book series, I was handed worn paperbacks from the library book sale. His birthday parties were elaborate affairs with dozens of friends, while mine consisted of a small cake shared quietly at home. The pattern continued into adulthood. When Marcus graduated with his MBA, both parents took time off work to attend his ceremony in Boston. When I graduated with my bachelor's degree in education, they claimed they had an urgent work commitment and sent a congratulations card instead. Despite these obvious disparities, I had convinced myself that they loved us equally, just differently. I reasoned that Marcus needed more attention because he was navigating a competitive corporate world, while my simple life as a teacher required less parental involvement. Looking back now, I realize how naive that thinking was. The accident happened on a rainy Friday evening in late October. I had just finished a parent-teacher conference at Riverside Elementary School and was driving my modest Toyota Camry home along Interstate 85. The rain had been coming down steadily all afternoon, turning the roads into slick, dangerous surfaces. I remember thinking about the weekend ahead and how I planned to grade spelling tests and prepare for the upcoming Halloween party my second-grade class was so excited about. Traffic was moving slowly due to the weather conditions, which I thought was a blessing. What I did not see coming was the 18-wheeler in the next lane losing control as its driver fell asleep at the wheel. The massive truck jackknifed across 3 lanes of traffic, and I had nowhere to go. The impact was devastating. The sound of crushing metal and shattering glass filled my ears as my small car crumpled like a tin can. Pain shot through every part of my body as I found myself trapped in the wreckage, blood streaming down my face, unable to move my legs. The rescue took nearly 2 hours. Firefighters had to use the jaws of life to extract me from what remained of my vehicle. I drifted in and out of consciousness during the process, hearing voices discussing my condition in urgent tones. Someone kept telling me to stay awake to keep talking to them. I remember asking if anyone had called my family, and a paramedic assured me they would take care of everything. At the hospital, the extent of my injuries became clear. 3 broken ribs, a severe concussion, a compound fracture in my left leg, and minor spinal cord damage that would require months of physical therapy. The emergency surgery lasted 5 hours as doctors worked to repair the damage and stabilize my condition. When I finally woke up in the ICU 2 days later, surrounded by beeping machines and the sterile smell of antiseptic, My first thought was wondering when my family would arrive. Sarah, my night nurse, was incredibly kind and patient with all my questions. When I asked about my family's whereabouts, she mentioned that the hospital had contacted them immediately after my arrival. She said they had spoken to my mother and provided updates on my condition. Naturally, I assumed they were on their way. After all, their daughter had nearly died in a horrific accident. Surely they would drop everything to be by my side during this traumatic time. But as the hours turned into days, that hospital room remained eerily quiet except for the occasional visit from medical staff. No flowers, no concerned voices in the hallway, no familiar faces bringing comfort during the most frightening experience of my life. Only my colleague Emma from school bothered to visit, bringing a small bouquet of daisies and news from my classroom. She mentioned that she had spoken to my mother, who explained that Marcus was dealing with some important business meetings in Singapore, and the whole family was simply swamped with various obligations. By the second week in the hospital, the loneliness had become suffocating. Emma continued her visits when she could manage it between teaching responsibilities, and a few of my former students' parents stopped by with get-well cards. But the absence of my immediate family created a hollow ache that no pain medication could touch. Every night I would lie awake listening to the sounds of other patients receiving visitors, hearing laughter and conversation drifting from nearby rooms, while mine remained silent. The most painful moment came when Dr. Thompson informed me that I would need a second surgery to address complications with my leg fracture. Hospital policy required a family member to sign consent forms and be present for the procedure. When I called my mother directly, her response shattered something inside me. Patricia spoke in the same tone she might use to discuss weekend plans, explaining that she and my father were swamped at work and Marcus had a big presentation coming up the following week. The casual dismissal in her voice made it clear that my medical emergency ranked somewhere below their daily inconveniences. This stark indifference became even more heartbreaking when I remembered how differently they had reacted to Marcus's minor health issues. Just the previous year, when he had suffered from food poisoning after eating bad sushi, both parents had immediately left work to rush to his apartment. They had spent the entire weekend nursing him back to health, taking shifts to monitor his temperature, and bringing him homemade soup. Yet here I was, having survived a near-fatal accident, and they could not even find time for a brief hospital visit. The nights were the worst. Lying in that narrow hospital bed, connected to machines and struggling with pain that seemed to penetrate every fiber of my being, I would replay memories of our family life. I thought about all the times I had made excuses for their behavior, convincing myself that their favoritism was just my imagination. But the cruel reality of my situation made it impossible to maintain those delusions any longer. Their absence spoke louder than any words they could have offered. Rachel, my day nurse, had worked at the hospital for over 15 years and had seen thousands of patients come and go. One afternoon, while checking my vital signs, she mentioned how unusual it was for someone to spend so much time alone after such a serious accident. Most families, she explained, practically lived at the hospital during their loved one's recovery. Some relatives even slept in chairs beside the bed, refusing to leave for more than a few hours at a time. Her observation was well-intentioned, but it only emphasized how abandoned I truly felt. During my third week of recovery, Emma brought me her iPad so I could stay connected with the outside world. Social media had never been particularly important to me, but being bedridden had made it my primary window into what everyone else was doing. What I discovered there delivered a crushing blow that made my physical injuries seem insignificant by comparison. My mother's Facebook profile showed pictures from a colleague's birthday party just 3 days after my accident, complete with smiling photos, and a caption about how life was too short not to celebrate special moments. Marcus had posted several updates from his golf outings with clients, including scenic shots from expensive country clubs and captions about perfect weekend vibes. My father had shared a video montage from a spontaneous trip to Virginia Beach, where he and my mother had apparently decided to spend a romantic weekend walking along the shore. These posts made it abundantly clear that they were not too busy to spend time together or engage in leisure activities. They simply were not interested in spending that time with me. The final straw came when I called my father directly from my hospital bed, determined to make him understand the gravity of the situation. I told him plainly that I had almost died, that I was scared and alone, and that I needed my family. His response was both cruel and revealing. Richard dismissed my concerns as dramatic exaggeration, pointing out that I was obviously fine since I could make phone calls. He suggested that I was being selfish by expecting them to disrupt their lives over what he termed a minor setback. In the room next to mine, I had the opportunity to observe what a loving family actually looked like. Mrs. Helen Johnson, a 72-year-old woman recovering from a mild stroke, was surrounded by constant care and attention from her 5 adult children. Her sons and daughters had created a rotating schedule to ensure someone was always present during visiting hours. David, her youngest son, had flown in from California and taken a 2-week leave of absence from his job to coordinate her care. Watching their interactions filled me with both admiration and heartbreak. Helen would light up whenever one of her children entered the room, and they would spend hours talking, laughing, and simply being together. When she expressed concern about being a burden, they would immediately reassure her that family always came first, that nothing else mattered as much as her recovery and well-being. The contrast with my own situation was stark and undeniable. One evening, Helen noticed that I never had visitors and gently inquired about my family's whereabouts. I found myself unable to articulate the truth without breaking down completely. Instead, I offered a weak smile and changed the subject, but her knowing look suggested she understood more than she let on. Her kindness toward me in the following days, treating me almost like another daughter, only highlighted how desperately I craved that type of unconditional love and support. Everything changed during my 4th week in the hospital, when Emma arrived with news that would reshape our family dynamics forever. Her usually cheerful demeanor was replaced by obvious concern as she sat down beside my bed and explained that Marcus had been arrested by the FBI on charges of tax fraud and embezzlement. The details were staggering. He had apparently been skimming money from client accounts and manipulating financial records to hide his activities for nearly 3 years. The amount involved was astronomical, over $2,300,000, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. Federal agents had raided his Manhattan apartment and seized his assets, including his expensive sports car and designer clothing collection. Marcus was facing the possibility of 15 years in federal prison, and the scandal had already made headlines in several financial publications. His prestigious career was over, his reputation destroyed, and his future entirely dependent on hiring the best legal representation money could buy. The estimated cost for his defense was staggering, somewhere in the range of $500,000 for attorneys capable of handling such a complex federal case. This meant that my parents, who had always lived comfortably but were far from wealthy, would need to liquidate virtually everything they owned to save their golden child from the consequences of his actions. Their retirement savings, their home equity, every investment they had made for their future, would have to be sacrificed to fund Marcus's legal defense. Emma also revealed that the arrest had created a media frenzy around my family. Reporters had been calling the house and showing up at my father's workplace asking questions about how well they knew their son and whether they had any knowledge of his criminal activities. The shame and embarrassment were apparently overwhelming, and my parents were struggling to cope with having their perfect family image shattered so publicly. For 3 weeks, these same people had been too busy to visit their daughter in the hospital. Yet when their precious son faced legal troubles of his own making, they suddenly found time to focus entirely on family matters. The irony was not lost on me, and it crystallized every feeling of resentment and hurt that had been building inside me since the accident. On Thursday morning of my 4th week, I was surprised to see both of my parents walking through my hospital room door for the very first time. Patricia was carrying an enormous bouquet of red roses and a box of expensive chocolates, while Richard held a teddy bear that must have cost $50. Their sudden appearance after weeks of absence was jarring, and their overly emotional behavior immediately put me on guard. Patricia rushed to my bedside with tears streaming down her face, apologizing profusely for not being able to come sooner. She claimed they had been worried sick about me but had been dealing with some urgent family matters that required their immediate attention. Richard nodded solemnly, explaining that they had wanted to be there, but circumstances beyond their control had prevented them from visiting until now. Their performance was Academy Award worthy, but I knew better than to believe a word of it. The next hour was filled with exaggerated displays of parental concern and affection. Patricia fussed over my appearance, asking if I was eating enough and whether the nurses were taking proper care of me. Richard inquired about my pain levels and promised to speak with my doctors about ensuring I received the best possible treatment. They both kept emphasizing how much they loved me and how precious I was to them, words I had longed to hear during my darkest moments in that hospital bed. But their behavior felt forced and unnatural, like actors reading from a script they had not properly rehearsed. Their eyes kept darting to their watches, and I could sense their impatience, despite their attempts to appear devoted. After 30 minutes of this charade, Patricia finally revealed the real reason for their visit. She explained that they needed to discuss something important with me, something that required my help and understanding as a member of our family. The conversation that followed was both predictable and devastating. Richard carefully explained Marcus's legal situation, emphasizing that their son had made a mistake, but did not deserve to have his entire life destroyed over it. Patricia added that Marcus was still family, still their child, and still deserving of their support during this difficult time. They spoke about him as if he were the victim of unfortunate circumstances rather than the perpetrator of serious financial crimes. Then came the request that revealed their true motivation for finally acknowledging my existence. They knew I had been responsible with money throughout my adult life, that I had managed to save a substantial amount despite my modest teacher's salary. They were aware that I owned my small house outright and had excellent credit that would qualify me for a significant loan. What they wanted was for me to mortgage my home and lend them the money needed to hire Marcus's legal team. Their pitch was carefully constructed to appeal to my sense of family loyalty and my natural desire to help others. They promised to pay me back with interest once the legal situation was resolved and Marcus could return to earning his substantial salary. They emphasized that this was temporary, that they would never ask for such a favor under normal circumstances, and that I was the only person who could save my brother from a terrible fate. As I listened to their desperate pleas, something shifted inside me permanently. The woman who had spent 28 years seeking their approval and acceptance was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood her true value in this family dynamic. I looked at these two people who had given me life, but had never really seen me as worthy of their time or attention, and I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. My response was delivered in a calm, measured tone that seemed to surprise them. I asked the question that had been haunting me for weeks: where exactly had they been when their daughter was lying alone in a hospital bed, fighting for her life, and struggling with the most terrifying experience she had ever faced? The question hung in the air like an accusation, which of course it was. Patricia immediately launched into a defensive explanation about how worried they had been, how they had called the hospital multiple times to check on my condition, and how Marcus's situation had required their immediate attention. She claimed they had been planning to visit but kept getting pulled away by urgent matters related to his arrest and the need to find legal representation quickly. But I was no longer interested in their excuses or justifications. I pointed out the obvious fact that I had needed them too, that I had been scared and alone and desperate for some sign that my family cared, whether I lived or died. I reminded them that I had almost lost my life in that accident, that I had undergone multiple surgeries, and that I had spent weeks wondering if anyone would even notice if I simply disappeared from their lives entirely. Richard's response revealed everything I needed to know about how he truly viewed me. Instead of expressing remorse or acknowledging the pain they had caused, he became angry and defensive. He accused me of being selfish and dramatic, suggesting that I was making my accident all about me when the family was facing a real crisis with Marcus's legal troubles. The implication was clear. My near-death experience was an inconvenience, but Marcus's self-inflicted problems were a genuine emergency worthy of their attention. When they finally made their formal request for me to mortgage my house and give them the money, I felt nothing but cold determination. This was my moment to make a choice that would define the rest of our relationship. I could continue playing the role of the accommodating daughter who always put family first, or I could finally value myself enough to say no to people who had never valued me at all. My answer was simple and definitive. I would not be giving them a single penny. I would not be mortgaging my house to fund legal defense for someone who had stolen millions of dollars from innocent people. I would not be sacrificing my financial security to clean up the mess created by their precious golden child. Most importantly, I would not be pretending that we were a close, loving family when their actions had proven otherwise. The transformation in their behavior was immediate and telling. The fake tears and exaggerated concern evaporated, instantly replaced by anger and disappointment. Patricia accused me of being heartless and vindictive, while Richard suggested that I was jealous of Marcus and using this situation to get revenge for imagined slights. Their true feelings about me came pouring out in that moment, confirming everything I had suspected but never wanted to believe. They stormed out of my hospital room that day and never returned. No goodbye. No well wishes for my recovery, no acknowledgement that I was still their daughter, regardless of my refusal to bankrupt myself for Marcus's benefit. Their departure was as telling as their arrival, proving that their love had always been conditional on my willingness to serve their needs and expectations. The months that followed my decision were challenging, but ultimately liberating in ways I could never have imagined. Emma helped me transition from the hospital to my own home, where I began the long process of physical recovery and emotional healing. Physical therapy sessions were grueling, but each small improvement felt like a victory over the forces that had tried to break me, both physically and mentally. During my recovery period, I had time to reflect on the relationships in my life and recognize who truly cared about my well-being. Emma proved to be more of a sister to me than Marcus had ever been a brother. My colleagues at school sent cards and flowers, and some of my students' parents offered to help with grocery shopping or household tasks. These gestures of kindness from people who owed me nothing stood in stark contrast to the abandonment I had experienced from my own family. As for Marcus, his legal troubles played out exactly as expected. Despite hiring expensive attorneys with money my parents raised by selling their house and liquidating their retirement accounts, he was ultimately sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The judge showed no sympathy for someone who had stolen from hardworking clients while living a lavish lifestyle funded by their money. My parents had sacrificed everything to try to save him, but justice prevailed regardless. In the year that followed, I heard nothing from my parents. No birthday wishes, no holiday greetings, no acknowledgement of my complete recovery from the accident. Their silence confirmed that their interest in me had been entirely transactional. When I refused to be their financial salvation, I ceased to exist in their world. Surprisingly, this realization brought me peace rather than pain. I began building new traditions and relationships that were based on mutual respect and genuine affection. The holidays that had once been sources of stress and disappointment became celebrations shared with people who actually enjoyed my company. I started dating again, eventually meeting someone who appreciated my strength and independence rather than seeing me as a backup plan or safety net. Most importantly, I learned to value myself in ways that my family never had. I realized that family is not automatically defined by blood relations, but rather by the people who show up when you need them most. The accident had been a traumatic experience, but it had also served as a necessary wake-up call about the toxic dynamics I had been accepting for too long. Looking back now, I understand that my parents' behavior was never really about me at all. It was about their own insecurities, their need to live vicariously through Marcus's success, and their inability to appreciate the quieter virtues of kindness, dedication, and integrity that I had always embodied. Their loss was much greater than mine, though they would probably never realize it. I chose to forgive them not because they deserved it or asked for it, but because carrying anger and resentment would have poisoned my own happiness. Forgiveness did not mean reconciliation or pretending that their behavior had been acceptable. It simply meant freeing myself from the burden of their expectations and disappointments. The greatest lesson I learned from this experience is that self-respect cannot be negotiated or compromised, even for family. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who consistently demonstrate that you are not a priority in their lives. Blood relation does not obligate you to accept mistreatment or sacrifice your well-being for people who would not do the same for you. Today I wake up each morning grateful for the accident that changed everything. It forced me to see my family clearly for the first time and gave me the courage to demand better treatment from the people in my life. I am stronger, happier, and more authentic than I ever was when I was desperately seeking approval from people who were incapable of giving it. What would you do if you found yourself in a similar situation? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding strength in difficult circumstances. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better treatment from the people they love. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to choose your own worth over other people's expectations. I wish you all the strength to know when enough is truly enough.